بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we are still continuing in the seerah of Ali Ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala an, and last time I had gone into the tangent of Ali radiallahu an's relationship with Umar ibn Khattab, and also before that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and the intermarriages that took place between the families of Ali and the families of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and had gone through a lot of that. And we had mentioned as well some of the aspects of the life of Umar ibn Khattab. And we now move on where we had left off, and we were talking about the conclusion of the time of Umar ibn Khattab, that Ali radiallahu anhu, when he saw the body of Umar ibn Khattab lying after he had been stabbed, he made that famous remark, and this was in the presence of Ibn Abbas and other people, and he said, "May Allah have mercy on you, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, for by Allah there is nobody whose record I would rather meet Allah with than yours." In other words, I'm not jealous of anybody's records other than your records. So this is a demonstration, a public tazkiyah that Ali radiallahu anh gave to Umar ibn Khattab. And of course, as we move on to the next phase, which is Uthman radiallahu anh, we remind again that it is very ironic that the group that disrespects Umar ibn Khattab neglects the fact that it was Umar ibn Khattab who gifted the mother of Zayn al-Abidin, Ali Zayn al-Abidin, to Hussein, the daughter of Yazdajard, right? The daughter of Yazdajard. There were two daughters, and the one of them he gave to the son of Abu Bakr, and the other he gave to the son of Ali Ibn Abi Talib. And therefore, from their perspective, the one whom they consider to be the fourth Imam, from our perspective, he's a great Sahabi, well, not a Sahabi, the fourth Imam, but a great family of the Prophet ﷺ, but we don't consider him to be an Imam, obviously. But from their perspective, their fourth Imam is in fact the product of a union that was a gift of Umar ibn Khattab to Hussein radiallahu ta'ala an. Hussein had the daughter of Yazdajad under him, and the two of them, they had a child by the name of Ali Zayn al-Abidin. So that is a blessing that Umar has upon Hussein, and the people who think they are the family of Hussein and supporting the family of Hussein have to take this favor into account. And we'll quickly move on. We're not going to go into the details of Uthman ibn Affan because we have just finished Uthman ibn Affan recently, and I had mentioned many of the incidents in the time of Uthman ibn Affan dealing with Ali ibn Abi Talib from the very beginning, when the Shura members were 6 in number and everybody was eliminated other than the two of them, Uthman and Ali. They were the last two. Who was the one who decided? Everybody should know. Who decided between them? Abdurrahman ibn Auf decided between them. How many days did it take him? 3 full days, in which it said he didn't even sleep. And he asked every person in Medina. And what this demonstrates is that this was not an easy choice. That Ali and Uthman radiallahu anh, they are very similar in their status, in their blessings. And people are, it's not that easy anymore. Unlike Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's time, where frankly, Ali radiallahu anh did not really have any supporters other than maybe 1 or 2 that they thought him to be more rightful. Otherwise, it's understood Abu Bakr has seniority, and the time of Umar is understood. Now, so many years later, Ali and Uthman, there's confusion. Who is the more befitting? And eventually, by a slim margin, after 3 days, Abdurrahman ibn Auf decides that Uthman is better for the Ummah. And he visits Ali privately, and he tells him, we don't know much of what he tells him, but one thing that we do know he tells him is that whoever I decide, the other one has to listen. Will you agree with this? And of course, the both of them agreed. Nobody's going to break away from the unity of the Muslims. And the next day, Abdurrahman ibn Auf announced that he had decided Uthman radiallahu anh, and Ali was there in the audience, and he was of the first people to give him the bay'ah. And so this was a public bay'ah, and there was never any dispute between Ali and Uthman over the caliphate after this. And as I had said from the very beginning, even if Ali radiallahu anh felt that it was appropriate to give him the Khilafa, he never challenged publicly, and he accepted Abu Bakr's status and Umar's status and Uthman's status, and he was a loyal vizier, a loyal supporter. And throughout the life of Uthman, we see this over and over again. Now, before we move on, just an interesting footnote, that there is a theological controversy within Sunni Islam regarding the issue is called Tafdeel Ali ala Uthman, considering Ali to be afdal or better than Uthman radiallahu anhu. That there is a theological controversy. What is the controversy? The controversy is as follows. Sunni Islam agrees unanimously that anybody who makes tafdeel of Ali over Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu has made a heretical claim. This is a deviancy that is sinful in the eyes of Allah. That this is not correct. And the person has become a person of innovation. And the same goes for Ali and Umar radiallahu anhu. There's no ikhtilaf. The question is, the one who says that Ali radiallahu anhu is better than Uthman, is this an ijtihad that is acceptable and forgiven, or is it a theological deviation? This is the question. And this question especially arose in light of the fact that in our tradition there are certain very famous ulama that it is alleged held this view, that Ali radiallahu anhu was afdal min Uthman radiallahu anhu. And there are many people whose names come up in this list, by the way. Sufyan al-Thawri is one of them. Abu Hanifa, it is alleged, had this view as well. Imam al-Nasa'i of our Sunan, Kitab al-Sunan fame as well. These are all names that are brought up, that these are of the people. The Musannaf Abdul Razak. I mean, some people are mentioned. And then of course you have the other side always that they deny, no, these narrations are not true. None of these people ever said these things. But the fact of the matter, there have been some people that were not from Ahl al-Tashayyur. They were not from the other camp, and they were within our camp, and they considered Ali radiallahu anhu to be afdal min Uthman, just as a matter of abstract theory, that on the list who has the more blessings of the two. And in the end of the day, the opinion of Sunni Islam became solidified, and these days you don't have anybody resurrecting those classical issues. So this is a controversy of a bygone era. And you should just be aware of it. That's why I said put it in a footnote. You should just be aware that in the first 200-300 years of Islam, there were some people who felt that Ali radiallahu anhu was more afdal, yani his blessings were more than the blessings of Uthman, and they respected all of them. Okay, realize that none of Sunni Islam ever disrespected any Sahabi. There's a difference between considering the order and then disrespecting. In any case, during the time of Uthman radiallahu anh, it is well known that Ali remained amongst his closest advisors, and I will not go into all of the incidents and the relationships and the fatwa and the political and economic decisions that Ali helped Uthman with. The advanced students of history can look this up, and it is well known that Ali was a trusted vizier, a trusted minister if you like, in the cabinet of Uthman. He was assigned multiple positions and he fulfilled all of those positions. We'll just conclude this issue of Uthman before we move on, that I already mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about the killing of Uthman, that Ali radiallahu anh played a very important role in defending Uthman, and especially his sons Hassan and Hussein. Multiple incidents I mentioned that Ali radiallahu anh offered to be of those who physically defend and fight Uthman, and Uthman said no. And once Ali called Uthman for his aid, and the people stopped him from coming in, and they physically harassed Ali radiallahu anh. So he took off his turban and he threw it into the house of Uthman, saying, I tried to get in, but the people are physically blocking me. And he sent Hassan and Hussein, and he told them to dress up with your armor, dress up in your protective gear, and go and live in the house of Uthman radiallahu anh. So Hassan and Hussein spent many of those last 30 or 40 nights, they spent them in the house of Uthman radiallahu anh. And in one particular instance, Hassan radiallahu anh was injured in an altercation and a fight, and he had to be carried out on a stretcher back to the house of Ali radiallahu anh. So all of this demonstrates that Ali radiallahu anh was a clear supporter of Uthman, and that he had sent his own children to defend Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu ta'ala anh. And just like we mentioned with Abu Bakr and Umar, as well there are intermarriages between Ali radiallahu anhu's family and Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's family. And of the earliest of these intermarriages, subhanAllah, I just remembered, did I last week talk about the marriage of Kulthum and Umar? I forgot. Subhanallah. Forgot this. Subhanallah. We moved on to the time of Uthman. We forgot the most important marriage. Subhanallah. I have to pause and go back quickly. Okay, this is the era of Umar radiallahu anh. I had to mention this. I just remembered now. It was in my notes, and then because I went into my tangent of the Zaydi and all of that, so then I skipped over it, and then these are my today's notes, and I don't have those notes for last class. But I remembered now, there was a whole page that I forgot. And of that page, I just remembered intermarriages. How could I forget? The intermarriage of Umar ibn al-Khattab with Kulthum, the daughter of Ali radiallahu anh. This is one of the most important marriages that we, Ahl Sunnah, affirms our narrative. It affirms our story, our version. And our version is Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. There's no tension between them. There's no hatred and animosity between them. That's our version. And of the obvious instances, we're going back to the time of Umar, I forgot this, is that Kulthum, the daughter of Ali radiallahu anh, from one of his wives, this obviously is not Fatima, Kulthum is now married to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Okay? And why did this happen? Because Kulthum, was a daughter of Fatima, the younger sister of Hassan and Hussein. There were two girls and two boys. Hassan and Hussein were the older one, and Kulthum was the younger daughter. And Umar ibn al-Khattab one day entered into the masjid, and he was very happy. And he said, "Congratulate me." They said, "Why?" So he said, "Because I am getting married." "Ask me to whom?" They said, "To whom?" He said, "To Kulthum, the granddaughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." And then he quoted a hadith that on the day of judgment, all lineages will be cut other than my lineage. That no lineage will be of any extra benefit other than my lineage. And this is what we, even Ahl Sunnah, believe, that the righteous person of the Ahl al-Bayt has a higher status in the eyes of Allah, if they are righteous. And if they are not righteous, then their nasab doesn't matter. So we, even Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, give double respect to the Ahl al-Bayt, if they are righteous. And we love them with a special love. And we admire them with a special admiration. And we believe that the family of the Prophet ﷺ is a blessed family if they are righteous. But they are not blessed by blood. But if they are righteous, then their lineage adds to their blessings. And this is something that we firmly believe in. So Umar ibn al-Khattab wanted to establish a relationship with the blood of the Prophet ﷺ. And so he asked Ali radiallahu anh to marry his daughter Kulthum. And Ali initially said she is too young to get married. And Umar ibn al-Khattab said, "Marry her to me, for by Allah there is no one who will respect her and marry her for the reasons that I want to marry her." Which is that she is the granddaughter of the Prophet ﷺ. That nobody is going to give her that ihtiram, that I am marrying her because she is the granddaughter of Rasulullah ﷺ. The respect I will give her because of that, and the honor I will give her, nobody else will give her because of that. And so Ali radiallahu anh gave his daughter Kulthum in marriage to Umar ibn Khattab. And by the way, they had a son and a daughter. They had a son and a daughter, and the son was called Zayd. And Zayd was called the son of two caliphs, because his father was a Khalifa and his grandfather was a Khalifa. The son of two caliphs, Ibn al-Khalifatain, because his father is Umar and his grandfather Ali Ibn Abu Talib, right? So he is the one person whose literally the both Khalifas' lineage comes in between them. Unfortunately, neither Zayd and his sister, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, they had any children. They both died without leaving children. So the lineage stopped. The lineage stops. And even a more tragic story, that Zayd, when he grew up to be a young man, he suffered a tragic death. There was a murder that took place, and Zayd went to investigate the murder. The tribe that had committed the murder decided to kill the investigator to cover up the crime. So they murdered Zayd as well. And he was like, you can say the qadi, the chief, you can, the one who has been appointed to look into the affairs, right? So this is in the time of Muawiyah, this is many years later. So Zayd went to figure out what's happening, and he went at night, and the tribe didn't probably recognize who he was, but they knew this is the inspector or whatever coming, so they murdered him as well. And the tragedy is that when his mother Kulthum heard, she essentially died of a heart attack, or whatever you would call it, that she literally fell down and passed away when she heard the news that Zayd had been murdered. So the both of them, their janazah was prayed at the same time, in the time of Muawiyah radiallahu anh, and the both of them, they were buried basically together, mother and son. But that is just, we're going back to the time of Umar. I completely forgot that had to be mentioned as well. Now let's come back to Uthman radiallahu anh. Apologize about that. Back to the time of Uthman radiallahu anh. So all of these intermarriages, what do they show? And these intermarriages, by the way, this is one of the most awkward intermarriages for the other group. How do you explain that Ali gave his own daughter to Umar ibn al-Khattab? How do you explain that? Do you know what excuse they have? He forced her. And this actually adds not forced her, forced him. This adds insult to Ali radiallahu anhu, right? Because you are saying that, rather than defend his daughter, rather than he just gave her away, رغم أنفه, if he didn't want to do that. And this is insulting to us, that how can you say this of Ali radiallahu ta'ala. But nobody can deny, this is public facts. Every book of history mentions that Ali radiallahu anh gave his daughter Kulthum in marriage to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala, and they had children. These are not anything you can deny. And as I said, this marriage in particular is the most awkward, because according to their interpretation, many of them actually believe that Umar attempted to kill Fatima. That's what they believe. It's a complete fabrication. That Umar attempted to kill Fatima. One day he got angry at her and he barged into the door and he did this and he did that. And to imagine that Ali radiallahu anh is giving the daughter of Fatima in marriage to Umar ibn Khattab, this is for us a clear-cut indication that there was no animosity, the likes of which is portrayed by the other group. Rather, they got along like good friends, and like good friends, there are minor incidents that take place. And this is something we also need to be clear about. There's no problem if you have a little bit of disagreement. Who doesn't have disagreement amongst good friends and amongst siblings, amongst uncles and aunts, whatnot? So in any case, the next marriage we talk about, now we get to Uthman radiallahu anh. Uthman's son, Aban ibn Uthman, married one of the Ahl al-Bayt, a grand niece of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the granddaughter of Ja'far. So Aban ibn Uthman marries the granddaughter of Ja'far. Ja'far is the full brother of Ali. And of course, this is the Ahl al-Bayt. And the Ahl al-Bayt, they are very selective who they're going to give their daughters to, because they are the Ahl al-Bayt. They have to be very careful who they give their daughters to. And so the son of Uthman, Aban ibn Uthman, and Aban ibn Uthman, we have mentioned him many times. In fact, I mentioned him in my first seerah lecture 5 years ago. I mentioned him, that Aban ibn Uthman was the first scholar of seerah that our history has ever seen. The first person to write a booklet on seerah is the son of Uthman ibn Affan. And from him all other seerah comes. He is the first alim, historian, the first seerah expert in our tradition. This is Aban ibn Uthman. His wife was the granddaughter of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. And there are other marriages that take place in the second and third generation from the descendants of Ali and the descendants of Uthman radiallahu anh. There is intermarriages going on, second, third, and fourth generation. And I don't need to confuse you all by all of these lineage, but the fact is there are at least 5 intermarriages that we are aware of between the family of Uthman and the family of Ahl al-Bayt. And this again demonstrates that in the first 200, 150 years of Islam, there is not this type of animosity that later groups claim to have been. Now let us begin with the actual Khilafa of Ali, and today we will have a long introduction about the fitna, the theological introduction. We're not going to get to the actual fitna until next week. But today we have to, before we begin the fitna, have to give the necessary precursors, the necessary disclaimers, and explain to you why it is problematic to talk about the fitna. But before the fitna, very quickly, the election of Ali ibn Abi Talib, how did it take place? On the day of the assassination of Uthman radiallahu anh, on the very same day, which is on the Friday of the month of Dhul Hijjah, in the afternoon. Uthman radiallahu anhu was massacred in the daytime before Salat al-Jumu'ah. In the afternoon, a group of Sahaba visited Ali radiallahu anhu and said to him that we need to have a leader. You cannot have a community without a leader, and we see you to be fit for this task. And Ali turns this down and says, allow me to be a helper like I have always been a helper. Meaning for the last 20 something years, 25 years, I've always been number 2 in command. I've always been a helper. And especially now, Ali felt hesitant to take charge because this was complete chaos. Now, when everything is helter-skelter, I feel uncomfortable taking charge. But the Sahaba insisted, and the senior Sahaba as well were of them, Ibn Abbas and others, they're insisting that there is nobody else. And there was nobody else whom they approached other than Ali Ibn Abu Talib. And so Ali said, very well, I will accept the bay'ah or the oath of allegiance, but it must be done in public. So he insisted to go to the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and an announcement was made, and the people gathered together and they gave the oath of allegiance to Ali ibn Abi Talib, and nobody dissented, nobody disagreed. Of the Sahaba that were there, none of them disagreed. Now, here we have a very interesting hadith that predicts that the prophetic model of ruling and government shall last for all of these years. There are a number of hadith that mention that there's going to be 30 years of proper Khilafa. And these hadith are very important to understand that Ali radiallahu an is under this 30 years of Khilafa. In the famous hadith reported in Abu Dawood, خِلَافَةُ النُّبُوَّةِ ثَلَاثُونَ سَنَةً ثُمَّ يُؤْتِي اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. خِلَافَةُ النُّبُوَّةِ ثَلَاثُونَ سَنَةً. The Khilafa of the prophethood shall remain for 30 years. Then after that, Allah will give the kingdom to whomever He wants. This hadith is in Abu Dawood and in Ibn Hibban al-Tabarani, it is authentic. So, خِلَافَةُ النُّبُوَّةِ ثَلَاثُونَ سَنَةً. Exactly 30 years are reported. When did the Prophet ﷺ pass away? Hijri. 11. Which month? Rabi' al-Awwal. Rabi' al-Awwal of the 11th month. So Rabi' al-Awwal of the 11th year of the Hijrah, our Prophet ﷺ passes away. Ali radiallahu an rules until Ramadan of 40 AH. 39 and a half years. Okay? So 39 and a half years, 29 and a half, sorry, 29 and a half years go by. And of course, at the death of Ali radiallahu an, Hassan was elected, or Hassan was nominated by the people in Kufa and the people who were followers of Ali radiallahu an. And in Syria, Muawiyah declared himself to be the Khalifa. So 2 people declared themselves to be the Khalifa at that point in time. And Hassan radiallahu an debated what to do. We're going to get to Hassan, Allah knows when. And eventually he decided, it's not worth it. I'm not going to go to war, even though his followers wanted him to go to war. And so, in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, in 41 AH, Hassan radiallahu an resigned, stepped down. And the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ was fulfilled to the day. Rabi' al-Awwal 11, Rabi' al-Awwal 41. And this shows us as well that Hassan radiallahu an should be considered to be Khilafa ala minhaj al-Nubuwah. That when Hassan radiallahu an was for those 6 months, that in reality he is following the Khilafa ala minhaj al-Nubuwah. And we should consider Hassan radiallahu anh to be a 5th Khalifa, but it's understandable he was only there for 6 months and really didn't do that much. So that's why we always say 4 Khalifa, and that also makes sense. But we should realize that Hassan radiallahu anh also made this cut. that there's going to be Khilafa 30 sana. And there is another hadith as well that I want you all to be familiar with and memorize. And it is a hadith that is very interesting, but it doesn't have a number of years. And this hadith is reported in Musnad Imam Ahmad as well, that the Prophet ﷺ said that سَتَكُونُ نُبُوَّةُ فِيكُمْ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ أَن تَكُونَ, that nubuwwah will be amongst you for as long as Allah wills. Then when Allah wants, He will lift nubuwwah. Then there shall be khilafa ala minhaj nubuwwah. There will be khilafa upon the methodology of nubuwwah. For as long as Allah wills, then Allah will lift it up. Then there shall be, so this is phase 3 now, nubuwwah, khilafa nabawiyya, then phase 3. Then there shall be mulkan aadan, a kingdom or dominion that is a harsh kingdom. Aad means harsh. There's going to be mulkan aadan, a harsh kingdom that will remain for as long as Allah wants it to remain. Then Allah will lift it up. Then there shall be mulkan jabriyan, a tyrannical mulk, tyrannical kingdom that Allah will allow to remain as long as Allah wills. Then Allah will lift it up. Then there shall be khilafa ala minhaj nubuwwah. There will be khilafa upon the prophetic methodology, and then the Prophet was silent. ثُمَّ سَكَتْ. So this hadith has generated a lot of discussion, because we have how many phases? Nubuwwah, khilafa ala minhaj nubuwwah, mulkan aadan, mulkan jabriyan, khilafa ala minhaj nubuwwah. 5 phases. 5 phases. The first 2 have clearly gone. The last one is clearly not here, and people say that will be the Mahdi, most likely. Okay? Or maybe before the coming of the Mahdi, something will happen, and something will bring Khilafa Nubuwwah, Allah knows best. But most people say that is the Mahdi. Khilafa ala Nubuwwah, again, the end. So we have 2 in the middle. Mulkan aadan and mulkan jabriyan. Which phase and when did one begin, when did one end? In reality, nobody can be certain, because these are what Allah knows they are. And Allah knows best. I have an opinion about this, and Allah knows best. It's just an opinion, that mulkan aadan could be that the kingdoms that have ruled the Muslims from within the Muslims. So we have the Ottomans and the Abbasids and the Umayyun and all of them. And the mulkan jabriyan could be colonialism and what has happened after that. That this is not a mulk that is like the previous mulk. Because if you look at it, there is a clear distinction between Muslims having ruled over themselves versus colonizers having colonized and broken us up, and we've had a whole different system. So this is an ijtihad that I have, and Allah knows best. Allah knows best. It's not something we can be certain about. That mulkan aadan is the internal Islamic rule. And it wasn't perfect, but at least it was better than the next one. Because jabriyan is worse. That is going to be a mulk that is dominating you. So aadan, okay, they were a little bit unjust. They had their palaces, they had their harems, they had their whatnot, but at least they were amongst you guys. At least they were one of you. And they ruled. They themselves were unjust by and large, but they ruled over you according to the laws of Allah. Then there's a mulkan jabri. And jabri is forcing, colonizing. And Allah knows this is my ijtihad. I mean, you're not going to find Ibn Hajar commenting the way I am, because he hasn't seen colonization, right? So this is a modern interpretation that I have, and I don't know anybody else who has it. I'm sure maybe some modern scholars have it as well, but I mean, this is Allah knows best. I feel this is a plausible interpretation, but nonetheless, we leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, of course, the 5th one, ثُمَّ تَكُونُ خِلَافَ عَلَى مِنْهَاجِ النُّبُوَّةِ. Then the Khilafah will return as it was upon Minhaj al-Nubuwwah, and Allah knows best, but my gut instinct that has to only be the Mahdi, because who else is going to bring about Khilafah ala minhaj? If we didn't have the Umayyi and the Abbasids upon the Khilafah minhaj nubuwwah, who else other than the one whom Allah Azza wa Jal will send? And that is the Mahdi at the end of times. But again, what we are interested in here, and I needed to mention this at some point in time, and I thought this is the appropriate time with Ali radiallahu an, that this is why we believe that Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu an, and we can add Hassan, they have a special status. It's not just coming out of thin air. There's textual evidences to show this. That our Prophet ﷺ explicitly said that when I pass away, you will see much difference of opinion. So, this hadith is in Abu Dawud. Listen to this. فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. This is where we get the phrase Al-Khulafa Ar-Rashidoon Al-Mahdiyin. The Khalifa that are Rashideen, that Mahdiyin. It is from a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, when I pass away, there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations. I command you to follow my way and the way of a group of people. Who are they? Al-Khulafa, the rulers, not any of them. Ar-Rashideen, they themselves are rightly guided. Al-Mahdiyin, they're rightly guiding others. They are Rashid, they're on the straight path. And they're Mahdi, they're guiding other people. And from the other hadith we learn that's going to be 30 years. Exactly 30 years. Literally, 30 sana. And what is 30 years? Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. And we can add Hassan radiallahu anhu, but the main thing is these four over here. So I needed to mention this point so that we all understand that we actually have textual evidence. Why do we say the Khulafa Ar-Rashideen, and why do we consider this to be a special era? Now, we now move on to the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and really at the level that we're doing, it doesn't make any sense to go over tertiary matters during the 5 years of Ali rules, 4.5 years, about what he did with the provinces, about his fiscal policies, his political decisions. We're really not that interested in these things. What we are interested in is the civil war. That's what we're interested in. So I'm not going to mention anything of other topics. Let me just get into the issue of the civil war. And today, for the next half hour, we will talk about why we will not talk about the civil war. Okay? That's what we're going to talk about. And then next week, I will go over very briefly as I can possibly can, what we need to know about the civil war. But today, we need to talk about why is this problematic to talk about? And why do we actually make a point not to talk about the civil war? So, we began by saying that Sunni Islam has a very explicit methodology about this time frame. What time frame? The time frame of the civil war between Ali and Muawiyah and Aisha radiallahu anhum ajma'in. We have a very explicit methodology. Firstly, we say that whatever took place between the Sahaba at this point in time is a matter of politics and history and not of theology. So we do not make any aqidah judgment. It was siyasa, it was politics, and it's historical. We don't consider any group to be deviant in theology. The differences they had were not of a Islamic nature, they were of a political nature. And this is in contrast with the other group, the Shia. They actually believe these differences are a theological nature. And they read in theology. And they say they're fighting over haqq and batil. And we say no, they were not fighting over haqq and batil. They were fighting over option A and option B. And option A and option B have to do with politics, not to do with the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we consider all of them to have wanted what is best for the ummah, and that their ijtihad was sincere for the sake of Allah. And we quote the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is a well-known hadith, it's in Bukhari and other books. إِذَا اجْتَهَدَ الْحَاكِمُ, if the judge performs ijtihad and he is correct in his ijtihad, he shall get a double reward. And if he performs ijtihad and he makes a mistake, then he shall still get a reward. So if you were sincere in wanting to arrive at the truth, and you tried to be fair, but you made a mistake, Allah will not punish you. You didn't know. You thought this would be the best course of option, and you made a mistake. So we believe that One side might get a double reward, other side might get one reward, but they will both be rewarded, even if it resulted in bloodshed. But they felt that this was what was best for the ummah. Secondly, we try our best to gloss over this time frame and to not go into too much detail. And this is the default. Now, perhaps somebody's doing a PhD in Islamic history and they need to, that's the exception. But amongst the masses, amongst all of us, the average Muslim, we should not delve into this time frame, and we should make it a point to not make it a point. We should literally try our best to skim over and don't spend too much time thinking about these topics. Why? Because we believe that there is no benefit to be gained whatsoever. Nothing. What happened, happened. As we say in English, don't cry over spilt milk. Or they say, let bygones be bygones. This applies here more than it applies to any other incident. What is to be gained? Also, we say that there is a lot of exaggerated reports, lies, slander that later groups invented about this time frame, especially the other party, because the other party reads in theology. And so they have entire history books that are full of their version of events, and we don't agree with any of them. And sometimes these reports seep into even later Sunni books as well. So it's difficult to sift through fact from fiction. We also say that this was a difficult time frame, and to go back resurrects wounds that are best left to heal. That to go back and mention he said, she said this, and this happened and that happened, you are going to create doubts in the minds of many Muslims. And you're going to reopen the scars of the ummah that are trying to be healed over 14 and a half centuries. And the simple example that can be given here is that imagine a couple who have had an argument in their past and they've now moved on. Is it healthy to go back 10 years, 15 years, 30 years and dissect each and every argument? Imagine if it's not the couple, it's your parents. And you will go back, now all of us, families are families. Who amongst us doesn't remember an argument between the mother and father? This is the reality. Every couple fights, and sometimes they fight in front of their children, right? Is it healthy for you to go back 50 years and resurrect the memory of an argument between your mother and father? Is that the legacy they left you with? Of course not. I mean, it is foolish and nonsensical, really, right? Yes, your parents and my parents had arguments, but is that what they left with you? No. So for us to go back and resurrect each and every nuance and anger and this and that, who is going to benefit? Nobody's going to benefit, right? So we believe that the Sahaba have even more respect and more right. Why should we then go back and resurrect something that happened in between them? It's just only going to cause pain and suffering, and nobody will benefit. And this is the standard narrative of the entire Sunni tradition. And there are so many quotes from the classical scholars that back this up. The famous Khalifa Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he of course shares the lineage of Umar and of the Umayyads. Because his father is from the Umayyads, his mother is from the descendants of Umar ibn al-Khattab. So Umar ibn Abdul Aziz shares Umar ibn al-Khattab's blood and the Umayyi blood. And he was asked, what is your opinion about the civil war, the fitna? What is your opinion about the fitna? And he replied, and his answer was used by dozens of scholars after him. He replied a beautiful statement, and it was used by Imam Ahmad, it was used by Imam Malik. The same thing was used by every scholar after him. He replied, that was bloodshed that Allah saved our hands from. So should I not protect my tongue as well from that? I wasn't there, my hand is not bloodied, so why should I get sin on my tongue? That was a bloodshed that Allah protected my hands from. Should I not protect my tongue from that as well. And then he said, the example of the Sahaba is like pools of water or buckets of water, and the way to keep those pools and buckets clean is to not dip your hands in them. Okay? There's lots of pools of water, leave them untouched, and they're going to remain pure. Lots of canisters of water, don't go and start shaking and rocking the boat, let it be, and it will remain pure. And Imam Hassan al-Basri, the famous Hassan al-Basri, he was asked, what is our position about the fitna of the Sahaba? And this is all one generation after. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, one generation. Hassan al-Basri, one generation after. This is the generation of their fathers. Hassan al-Basri is asked about the fitna of the Sahaba. And he says, that was a war the Sahaba witnessed, but we were absent. And they had knowledge of it, but we are ignorant of it. So when they agree upon something, we follow them. When they disagree, we stop and don't say anything. So this is Hassan al-Basri. That was a time frame that they witnessed it, we were not there. And they had knowledge of both sides. We don't have knowledge of it. So it's best to be quiet on them. And Ahmad ibn Hanbal has many statements about this. And when he was said, which side do you praise? He said, I only say good of both sides. لا أقول إلا خيرا. Both sides I say nothing but good. Muawiyah radiallahu anh, and Aisha even, and Ali, all of them, because they all went to war one after the other. We'll talk about that. The Battle of Jamal, the Battle of Siffin. We'll talk about that very briefly, as I told you. But we say nothing but good of all of them. So this then became the standard doctrine of Sunni Islam, so much so you will find it in theological creeds. Creeds that were written. What do Sunnis believe? And there are booklets that are written in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries. The Aqidah Tahawiyya and Aqidah this, Aqidah that. You have these booklets that this is the creed of Sunni Islam. It has become a part of those creeds that we do not speak about this era. It is actually now theology. So you have, for example, Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, one of the early scholars of creed. He writes in his treatise, which is a treatise of Aqidah al-I'tiqad, it's called the Aqidah al-I'tiqad, that of the doctrines of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is to remain quiet regarding what transpired between the Sahaba. That's one of the points he has mentioned. And the same has been found in many other treatises as well. Ibn Battah al-Ukburi and other creeds as well. They explicitly mention in them the creed of As-Sabuni. As-Sabuni has a book called The Creed of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He died 430 something, 434. So he has a creed, and in it, and of the doctrines of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that we remain quiet about the fighting that took place between the Sahaba. So it is now become a creed of Sunni Islam. What does remain quiet means? Means we don't criticize either side. We do not criticize either side. And Imam al-Qurtubi writes that it is not allowed to accuse any Sahabi of intentionally disobeying the Prophet ﷺ, for all of them performed ijtihad, desiring the rewards of Allah, and they are looked at as leaders for all of us. And Allah has made it obligatory on all of us to remain quiet regarding the fighting that took place between them, and we only mention them with the best of words. Why? Because of the sacred status of the Sahaba, number one. And number two, because of the prophetic prohibition to curse them. And number three, because Allah has informed us that He has forgiven them and is pleased with them. End quote. So he mentions three reasons. Why are we not allowed to speak about the Sahaba in this manner? Number one, because they have a sacred status from the Quran and Sunnah. They are not like other people. كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. And the Prophet ﷺ said, you are the best generation that the Ummah has ever seen. That the best generation is my generation. So number one, they have a sacred status. Number two, the Prophet ﷺ forbade us to curse them. Hadith is in Bukhari. لا تسبوا أصحابي. Do not denigrate or curse my companions. Hadith in Sahih Bukhari. Loving the Ansar is a sign of Iman. If loving the Ansar is a sign of Iman, how about loving the Muhajirun? So the Muhajirun have a higher status. So number two, the prohibition of cursing the Sahaba. And then number three, the Quran has informed us that Allah has forgiven them and Allah is pleased with them. In 12 verses in the Quran at least, Allah says, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. So the Quran has given the testimony to all of the Sahaba. So because of this, we do not say anything about them except good. As well, historically speaking, one can say that never has any scholar attempted to delve into this fitna and talk about it in detail, except that that knowledge has become a source of fitna itself. And that book, or in our times the CD lectures or the cassettes or YouTube videos or whatever, has actually caused more controversy and damage than good. And I myself am aware of many people in the last 20, 30 years that have attempted to give a detailed analysis of what happened, and they have been roundly criticized by scholars greater than them and their peers, and they've caused confusion in the ummah by what they have done. And I say this, and I ironically know that even as I make this disclaimer, next week when I mention as quickly as I will, I have no doubt that some people will release YouTube videos about me as well, and release PDF documents and whatnot, because it really, you're not going to satisfy anybody. You're never going to make everybody happy when it comes to this incident. And you're going to say something, one phrase, one wording that some person might legitimately or illegitimately read in and say, why was that said? And wallahi, it is best to simply be as clean as possible. Nonetheless, I will try to skim over with a bird's eye view, because we are doing a history class in the end of the day, and in the context of what we're doing, it does make sense to just go over it in just a little bit about what exactly is the Battle of Jamal, what exactly is the Battle of Siffin, without obviously going to too much detail, and also obviously by respecting the Sahaba as we do so. And Ibn Taymiyyah was asked about this incident as well, about the fitna, and he responded. And Ibn Taymiyyah wrote about this a lot in many different fatwa. He responded in many different treatises. And in one place he said, and I found this to be a very comprehensive statement that he has. It's a bit long, but it's very beautiful. And I'll explain it bit by bit. He said, it is confirmed with authentic reports that Uthman and Ali and Talha and Zubair and Aisha are all from the people of Jannah. I'm going to break this down. So, Uthman and Ali are of course Khulafa. Talha and Zubair were of the vocal opponents of Ali radiallahu anhu in this time frame. And they joined the other side and they had criticisms of Ali radiallahu anhu, and this led to the battle of the camel, the battle of Jamal, the battle of the camel. And Ibn Taymiyyah is saying, and Aisha is on that side as well, right? So Aisha and Talha and Zubair are on one side, and Ali is on the other side. And Ibn Taymiyyah is saying, Aisha, Talha, Zubair, and Ali, we know for a fact they are from the people of Jannah. So how can we take sides about one being right, the other being wrong, when Allah has testified that they're all from the people of Jannah? Then he moves on. In fact, we know that no one who has given the Bay'atul Ridwan, the Bay'atul Ridwan is the time of Hudaybiyah, the Bay'atul Ridwan. No one who has given the Bay'atul Ridwan shall enter the fire of hell. That's 1,400 Sahaba. All of them by guaranteed testimony are going to Jannah, which means everything they do will be forgiven. Or else they're not, they're not going to Jannah, are they? 1,400 Sahaba, instantaneous, straight to Jannah. And there were many on both sides. In fact, there are three sides in this case, right? Because the battle of the Jamal, the camel, is between Aisha, Talha and Zubair and their forces, and Ali. And the battle of Siffin is between Muawiyah and Ali. So there's two battles. And of those 1,400, you have people on all of these three armies. So we know for a fact that none of them are going to Jahannam, they're going direct to Jannah. Then he says, and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and Amr ibn al-As, and Muawiyah. This is in the battle of Siffin. The battle of Siffin, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, Amr ibn al-As, and Muawiyah are participating in that battle. They are all from the Sahaba. And they have specific fada'il, blessings mentioned in the hadith. So all of them, they have genre of hadith praising them. So he then moves on. As for what has been regarded of the civil war, what has been narrated, much of it is fabrications. We don't even know, really. We were not there. And 100 years later, 200 years later, people are writing books about it. We don't know. And even what is true regarding that, then if the Sahaba were correct in their ijtihad, they shall get 2 rewards. If they were incorrect, they will get 1 reward. So whoever did what, we believe they're either double reward or 1 reward. And all of their mistakes shall be forgiven, even if we were to assume these mistakes are sins. Because they are Sahaba and sins are forgiven by many, many factors. And then he goes on, and this entire generation, all of these people, they come under what the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of all generations is my generation. So these people are the best of all generations, and all of them, Ali's radiallahu anhu's army, Muawiyah's army, and Uthman and Aisha's, all of them come under this hadith. And he says, we also have another hadith. So we're mentioning some ahadith that are predicting the fitna. Some ahadith are predicting the fitna. And these ahadith are important because directly and indirectly they praise both sides as being Muslim. This is the key point. He mentions the first of them. Number 1, there shall be an outcast group that shall leave my ummah during the time of differing. So there shall be, the Arabic word is mariqa. Mariqa is a heretical group or an outcast group. Okay, that is being expelled from the ummah during a time of furqa. When there's going to be a furqa, there's going to be a third group coming out. So there's going to be an iftiraq, and from this iftiraq, a third group will come out. Pause here. This is a prediction of the Khawarij. And they will come out when the ummah is already divided. But the Prophet ﷺ did not criticize that division as much as he criticized the mariqa. Then he said, the group that is closer to the truth shall fight the mariqa group. And Ali's group fought the Khawarij. Okay, this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, by the way. Sahih Muslim. So it predicts that there's going to be 2 groups. It does not criticize either group. But which group is criticized? The mariqa group. The mariqa, they went outside. And the group that is closer to the truth shall fight the mariqa group. So this hadith predicts the mariqa group. Another hadith he mentions, this Ali ibn Taymiyyah. It is reported in the Sahih that the Prophet ﷺ held up Al-Hasan ibn Ali when he was giving the khutbah. This hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. That he kissed Hassan. That Hassan walked into the masjid and he tripped on his garment, and he would have been 3 years old, 2-3 toddler at the time. So the Prophet ﷺ interrupted the khutbah. He came down, he picked Hassan up, and he went back on the mimbar, and he continued giving the khutbah with Hassan in his arm. And he picked Hassan up, he kissed Hassan, and he said, "Inna bni hada sayyid." This son of mine is a leader. Inna bni hada sayyid. This son of mine is going to be a leader. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall cause reconciliation through him for لِفِئَتَيْنِ عَظِيمَتَيْنِ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. This hadith is in Bukhari, the most authentic book. Through him, Allah shall cause reconciliation between whom? Between 2 great groups of Muslims. And we all know, what did he do? He resolved the tension between the followers of Ali and the followers of Muawiyah. And he resigned himself for the greater good of the ummah, and that tension was resolved for the next 20 years. For the next 20 years, that tension was resolved. It was bordering on another civil war. But Hassan radiallahu anh gave up what he believed was rightfully his, and we also believe was rightfully his. But the unity of the ummah is more important than bloodshed. And he gave it up, and the Prophet ﷺ predicted this. So, why is this hadith important? Because the Prophet ﷺ described both groups as what? Two great Muslim groups. So Ibn Taymiyyah uses this hadith to demonstrate that both sides were good. And then he says, and this is a very interesting prediction, and then he says, and in the two Sahihs, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, regarding Ammar ibn Yasir, our Prophet ﷺ said, تَقْتُلُهُ الْفِئَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ تَقْتُلُهُ الْفِئَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ. This is a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. The rebellious group shall end up killing him. Ammar shall be killed by the rebellious group. Now pause here. Next week we'll discuss. Ammar ibn Yasir was a close confidant of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he was killed by the other army. And an arrow came and struck him, and he died on the side of Ali radiallahu anh, and his death was taken as the sign that Ali radiallahu anh was closer to the truth. Because the hadith says the baghiya firqa will kill him. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah says the word baghi also occurs in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hujurat. وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا التَّبِقْ حَتَّى تَفِيَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. The point is, read the translation, I don't have time to go into all of this, but in a nutshell, the word baghiya does not mean kafira. And Allah says, if two groups of mu'mins fight one another, even if one of them is baghat ala al-ukhra, وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ قَتَتَلُوا. So Allah calls two groups mu'min in the Quran, even if one of them is baghiya. Baghiya means they have politically rebelled. And it is true, Muawiyah politically rebelled. So he is closer to the fi'atul baghiya, but that doesn't mean that they are, astaghfirullah, evil, that they are, astaghfirullah, heretical or kafir or something like this. No. And he quotes the Quran to prove this. Because the Quran calls one group baghat, the other group is not doing baghawa, and the both of them are called mu'mins in the Quran. Okay? So he says therefore that this is also clearly permitted, and he says it has been confirmed from the Quran and Sunnah and the unanimous consensus of all of the Salaf that both of these groups are believing Muslims, even though, and this is an important point which the other group does not believe we say this, but we say this loudly and clearly, this is our position. Even though Ali ibn Abi Talib was closer to the truth than the group that he opposed. End quote of Ibn Taymiyyah. This is our position. And I said this when I mentioned in the lecture on Karbala, that we actually consider ourselves to be the true Shia to Ali. We are the original Shia to Ali, the real partisans of Ali radiallahu anh. We are the real ones because we don't go to extremes. And this is Ibn Taymiyyah who is saying that Ali radiallahu anh was closer to the truth than the other side. Unfortunately, many of the ignorant people say that Sunnis support Muawiyah against Ali. And that's just wrong. We believe that Ali and Muawiyah were both sincere, but Ali had more claim to truth than Muawiyah. And we don't curse Muawiyah radiallahu anh, and we don't say bad of Muawiyah radiallahu anh, but we say that Ali was more correct than Muawiyah. This is our position. But here's an interesting caveat. Ibn Taymiyyah says that in fact the Sahaba were three categories. The Sahaba were three categories. Number one, is Ali's group, number 2 is Muawiyah's group. And between these two, Ali is closer to the truth than Muawiyah. But he says there's a third group, and that group is upon the truth. So the Prophet ﷺ says the one that is closer to the truth and the one that is further from the truth. So the one closer is Ali, and the one further is the other group. But then there is one group that is even more upon the truth than both of them, and that's the smallest of them all. And these were those who did not participate at all. Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas and others, the smallest of the groups, they did not participate in either side. And they refused. Ibn Abbas fled to Ta'if. He goes, I'm not going to do anything. Just worship Allah. I would go Makkah, Ta'if, and he died in Ta'if. He didn't want to do anything of either side. And the position that we have, that was the most authentically pure. That they didn't even participate, and they lived quietist, pacifist lives. In times of internal fitna, the best thing to do is to go, as the Prophet ﷺ said, lock your houses, break your swords. Don't get involved killing other Muslims. This is the philosophy of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. That is the best. Let your hand be clean of any blood. But that's idealistic, and in the end, not everybody can do that. And you need politicians that will do the lesser of the two, the better of the two. And that is Ali radiallahu anh. He did what somebody had to do. And we say that the other side had an ijtihad, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not punish them for that ijtihad. And one final point that we'll say as well, and that with this we will conclude the introduction. So next Wednesday, inshallah, we'll actually discuss Siffin and Jamal and whatnot. As I said, in the bird's eye view, we're not going to go into a lot of detail. And wallahi, to be honest with you, wallahi, it is very easy for me or anybody to take this incident and spend at least 5 weeks on it. To go into every riwayah and who's, but what are we going to gain? Wallahi, what are we going to gain? It's just best to zoom over it, have some generic facts as much as possible, and then move on. And one final thing that we're going to do now is that, in fact, there are authentic ahadith that predict, the Prophet ﷺ predicted that Ali radiallahu anh and Aisha radiallahu anha would have a physical battle between the two of them. He predicted this, and he commanded Ali radiallahu anh to treat Aisha in a gentle manner and return her where she came from. This is a prediction, and it is mentioned in a number of books. The most authentic hadith in this regard is Musnad Imam Ahmad, and this is of the end of the hadith, is volume 41 in the Musnad, page 197, hadith number 24,654. Now, Musnad Imam Ahmad put the Sahaba in alphabetical, not alphabetical order. He put the Sahaba in the order of, he began it in the order of seniority, and then he kind of moved alphabetical. So it's a little bit bizarre way to figure out. But he put the female Sahaba at the end of the book. Okay, so the female Sahabiyat, they are at the end of the book. And so the hadith we're narrating is from Aisha radiallahu anha, so it occurs at the end. And this printing that I have of Musnad Imam Ahmad, it is in 50 volumes, the last 5 of which are indexes. So there's 44 volumes of actual ahadith. 44 volumes like this, by the way, of actual ahadith. This is the largest book of hadith that is in print. So in volume 41, and that's because Aisha radiallahu anha, she takes up 3 volumes at the very end. 3 volumes are Aisha. Okay, so in volume 41, we have a hadith of Aisha, and this is the most authentic, and I'll quote you another one that is not as authentic, but it is, inshallah, Hasan, that Aisha, when she came upon the plains of Al-Hawab, Al-Hawab is the plains outside of Basra, she heard dogs barking in the distance. And when she heard the dogs barking in the distance, she said, I feel that I shall return unsuccessful. I feel that I'm not going to win this battle. I'm going to return unsuccessful. because I remember the Prophet ﷺ predicting to his wives and asking, which one of you will be the one that will hear the dogs of Hawab barking? Hawab is the plains outside of Basra. And Aisha heard the dogs barking on her way to the battle of Jamal, the battle of Jamal. And when she realized she's outside of Hawab and she heard the dogs barking, so then it reminded her of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And when she said this, Zubayr ibn al-Awwam said to her, are you going to go back? No, go on. Perhaps Allah will bring reconciliation through you, through what we are doing. So she proceeded onwards. Okay, so this indicates that Aisha had heard the Prophet ﷺ mentioning that one of his wives will hear dogs barking in the plains of Hawab. Okay, and there is a longer version of this hadith reported in Ibn al-Jawzi's book of Al-Ilal, where Ali radiallahu anh was sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Aisha was behind the veil, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Ali, سَيَكُونُ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ عَائِشَةَ أَمْرٌ. There's going to be between you and Aisha an incident, some type of fighting. Amr is a big thing, it's going to happen here. Ali said, أَنَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Me, I'm going to do something I cannot imagine. I'm going to do something. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Naam, yes, you will do something. Ali said, فَأَنَا أَشْقَاهُمْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. So I am the worst of the two then. Like, how could I do something against Aisha? I am the worst of the two. So the Prophet ﷺ said, لا, ولكن إذا كان كذلك فأرددها إلى مأمنها. No, I'm not saying you're the worst of them. But when that happens, then make sure you bring her back to her place of security. When it's all over, make sure you bring her back to her place of security. Okay, this hadith is in Ibn al-Jawzi's book Kitab al-Ilal, and it supports this hadith of not Bukhari, the hadith of Imam Ahmad's Musnad. Okay, now this also explains Ali radiallahu anhu's treatment, because one of the criticisms of the Khawarij, how could you fight? Ali is being asked, how could you fight Muawiyah and Aisha and not deal with them as kuffar? Either you're upon truth or they're upon truth. If you're upon truth, then you should have dealt with them in the proper manner. And Ali radiallahu anhu said that who amongst you would be able to take your mother as your milk yamin? Because that is the net result of what you're thinking about. Because what happened when Ali won the battles of Jamal, he did not allow anyone to be hurt or harmed. He did not take any prisoners of war. He did not take any ghanima. Nothing. Because this is not the battles. The rules of jihad do not apply now. This is a civil war. It's not a jihad in that sense. It's a problem, internal problem. So he did not allow anyone to be harmed, and he returned Aisha under his own protection to Medina. And this is a fulfillment of what the Prophet ﷺ told him to do. When that happens, return her to her place of security. فَارْدُدْهَا إِلَى مَأْمَنِهَا. And that's exactly what he did. Okay? So the point being that we actually have multiple predictions of the Prophet ﷺ, of the battle of Siffin and the battle of Jamal. And I just gave you them today in today's lecture. The battle of Siffin has been predicted in multiple ahadith. And the battle of Jamal has also been predicted in this hadith. And in both of these predictions, the Prophet ﷺ is not criticizing either side as being deviant. He simply says it's going to happen, treat them fair and square, treat them nicely, to bring her back to her place. And therefore, to conclude today's lesson, that we believe that what happened between the Sahaba is a sad tragedy, and that nobody benefits to go back and resurrect each and every sordid detail, and that it is in our iman's best interest to gloss over this, and that we do not criticize the niyyah of any of the Sahaba who participated, even if we can say that perhaps some of them were closer to the truth than others. Yes, we can say that, but we say that the ones that were not as close to the truth, their niyyah was sincere. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them for their sincerity, and whatever they have done, as Ibn Taymiyyah said, even if somebody wants to consider it to be a sin, it shall be forgiven in light of the hasanat that they have done as well. And by the way, this leads to one final point as well. Nobody is saying that the Sahaba are sinless, by the way. This is not what we believe. Ibn Taymiyyah and others, they explicitly mention the Sahaba are not sinless. But we say no Sahabi has khiyana or treachery. It's one thing to commit a sin. We all commit sins. It's another thing to betray Allah and His Messenger. And no Sahabi will betray Allah and His Messenger. That is what we say, impossible. That sin is not possible. Every Sahabi has what he believes is the best interest of the Ummah at heart. But we are not saying that the Sahaba cannot commit personal sins. The Sahaba can indeed, and they have committed personal sins, but no Sahabi can betray the trust of Allah and His Messenger, and all of them want what is best for the Ummah. With that, inshaAllah ta'ala, we will pause for today, and next week we will go over the battles of Siffin and Jamal, and perhaps even mention some things about the Khawarij. And with that,